Hi, I'm Pierre Venter from BIM Initiative, consultancy for BIM, architecture, design, across the entire spectrum. Thank you for attending the BIM Coordinator Summit 2025, an excellent exercise that's been created by Ralph Montague and the rest of the team. An excellent time to be held by everybody. Quick little feedback on myself. I studied architecture in South Africa, been practicing for 30 odd years, and bought my first copy of Revit in 2003. So I'd like to think that I can actually turn Revit on and use it. When we first started architecture, when I graduated, we worked on tracing paper, pens, with overlays, register bars, things that you don't see anymore. We then transferred to CAD, AutoCAD, and massive workstations at the time, incredibly expensive, probably with less power than the IBM PC, which was the next generation we moved on to. All the way through to where we are in digital technology right now. The revolution has been, it's carrying on, and will continue. Has it been exciting? Yes, it has. Quick one about my experiences is we're here to actually look at the performance matters. And part of the exercise of the performance matters is the fact that performance has some impact, business case, the design case, and every other aspect of where we're working. So the significance of performance is there's two parts. The first part is that performance matters. It's important in projects that we actually do measure the performance. We have KPIs, we have various different measures, but it's something that we need to do from the get-go, from the beginning. The other meaning is that what are the matters, the issues, the things about performance? What do we need to pay attention to? So first part has got to be automation. Clearly, automation has so many benefits. One, to reduce the routine tasks and rather focus on things that are far more important. So from an architecture point of view, it's about the design, it's about the occupancies, it's about all the aspects that go in there. It's about coordination, collaboration, and integration. One term I do like as an acronym is AEC plus OO, architecture, engineering, construction, plus owner-operators, the full life cycle. I've been fortunate enough to have been engaged in a number of projects on that, and it's becoming more and more evident as we step out, is that the automation introduces us a new set of needs. If we take the needs on ISO 9650, basically it's around quality, the project lifetimes, what's got to be delivered, and integrating the design, the delivery, and operational use. So we continue on a journey, each and every one of us, about investigating, being curious. And that's one of the requirements that AI and various automation generative tools will require. However, there are three words which have popped up in various times in my life. It's about the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so part of this exercise is, when we start looking at projects, what is the one thing that we have in common? People. So the good, the bad, and the ugly is, how do we address all the things that we do in the delivery of a project? And we need to make sure that we do the right thing. One of those is about communication. So as a lesson, share the results with the team and management, and then later with the client. Really, really important. Construction projects are about teams. Teams of people whose sole requirement in real terms is deliver a project on time, on budget, and right for the purpose. We've got many different definitions of that, but that's essentially what we're looking at. The other part is that automation comes with a large set of benefits. But automation, in my opinion, is part of my toolbox. One of the things about my toolbox is whether it's pens, pencils, paper, a set square, a computer, I need to keep things in a toolbox sharp. And that's the important part about what we need to interact. We need to keep the tools sharp and fit for the purpose. One of the areas that we do move into is where we have to look at, and it's a quote, it was originally people, process, technology, which I've rephrased, people, as in capitals, plus process. So when we take people and we provide a process, the benefits that accrue is people have a skeleton on which to operate. They can take their knowledge and apply it on that process, which everybody then understands, plus technology. And you'll note the technology is in lowercase. The significance is in those three, and the sequence is people first, then a process, then technology. Technology is the enabler. And an old adage that I had learned many years ago was about you need to look back to see forward. And it's a sailing analogy where if you are going in the doldrums, you're going round and round in circles. You need to look back and see where the wake is to see that you're actually going to the target. Another adage was about look and see. We all look, but sometimes we don't see. The important part about that look and see action is that we need to understand more about what we're seeing, the interpretation, and that is crucial in the construction industry. People plus process plus technology. We had a look at an activity called the big room. And in this particular instance, we need to go and consider what does a big room have. And performance is important. So to kick this off, the management was involved daily. We had a 45-minute briefing with the project manager and the QS present. Two key people, one for the project management and one for the costing. Every lead architect engineer ended up giving a briefing on what they had achieved the day beforehand, what they were planning to achieve that day, and the third, what they planned to achieve the following day. All staff were included, so 45 minutes could be considered a wasted time, but it wasn't. We had email only for the record purposes, and that was an agreement with everybody. One of the keynotes that there was is working in the big room, the conversation snippets trigger responses. In other words, somebody has a key term and they have knowledge on it, they could then share that with other people. The other part was that teams actively contributed in tasks, work sessions, in issues, and raising solutions. So, what is the takeaway? Enable the people in the team to develop, achieve, or get autonomy within that space, that they feel they can contribute and be heard, which was something that had not worked before. The investment in the relationship in the team is really important, especially when you have teams from across the world in different places. And one of the things was to ensure that the process, workflows, and practices are aligned between disciplines and followed in a rigid, robust quality control methodology. How did the big room work? There was a study that looked at the adjacency, people sitting nearby, and how often they would communicate versus the distance. Now, typically we do that on email. But in this particular study by MIT, it was in fact that when you're sitting adjacent to somebody, the communication is 100%, and we understand that. The next part is that if we move to 30 meters away, it drops to 13%, 1/10. And if we go to 50 meters, it drops away completely. Nobody walks 50 meters or half a football field. It's also interesting to note that if you move up or down one floor, it also drops to 0. Nobody walks up a floor. So, are these just new interpretations or new insights? Firstly, why did we consider working in the big room? Well, we did that because the teams were previously in diverse places within the building. The different disciplines did not talk across. It was a mixed disciplinary engineering practice, but the teams did not intermingle. Work was always done in an insular fashion, handover, and almost part of, you had a set of drawings on paper, otherwise you didn't interact. Now the question is it relevant anymore, given that we are doing remote working? We've had COVID, we've had the various different interactions where we were forced to work remotely. But now we have technologies that mean we can work remotely, particularly in global teams. Now, one of the things about working in the big room was there was an interaction capability with people free to get up, move, and go and communicate, connect with other people. So connecting in a collaborative environment. So this is the first start of being able to work collaboratively. It was a case of opening doors to that interaction for the first time. Walking to a peer's desk or a colleague and opening a chat and doing whatever was required. Now, the important part about this was we moved people from individual spaces within the building to a singular space where everybody was together. In order to change the way, the methodology of people working, what we did was we moved the seating around. An engineer sitting next to an architect, next to the document controller, next to a QS, next to the BIM manager, and that interaction of different role players meant that people started listening and talking, getting a structural engineer advising the architect on where the structure should be going, why it should be done in a certain way. The other part about this was the work area could move based on the tasks. So if there was something that would benefit by moving people around, they would just sit at a new desk, and the discussions would change according to the tasking that they had made for them. Important part for everybody is the analog part, the old grey part. Sketch pads, not iPads, a pencil, a pen, and a thick marker. And yes, it does work. People drew something before they placed it on the computer. That was because they were not all skilled at using Revit or Civil 3D at the time. The next part about our world is the knowledge base. It's absolutely crucial that we look at something like this. So this is a project timeline. On one side, we've got what's developing, the project model. In the middle, central to both the data and deliverables on the bottom, on the right-hand side, are the red blocks, the knowledge. And all of the knowledge is then gleaned from that project. Now, we have firms who have large amounts of information from completed projects, that wealth of experience that's been developed through all those times and involvements. What do we do with it? How do we share that experience and that knowledge? So this is a demonstration to show the growth of that. Firstly, we start with the project where the big rectangular block, the knowledge base, is first. Before we start the project, we look at the history, the historical information, and we then identify what we need as solid decisions to contribute for early decision making. So, what are the benefits of the knowledge base and all the knowledge blocks as we go? Is that they are gleaned from the model, from the team, from data, and shared. The lessons learned are really important. There were project examples, and this particular instance is just a generic building, showing the form and the development as we proceed. The important part from different projects, is an example of a mall and a shopping mall. It's a commercial venture. There's a mix of retail, social, cultural elements, particularly in the Middle East, and the supporting services that are required. So layouts are typically standardized with line stores, anchor tenants across the various different portfolios. So this is a whole pile of history that's available, not just in a single building, but a group of buildings. The important part then is also room data sheets, that population of information that allows us to do planning at the earliest possible stages. Applications like Roombook, as example, were very useful. The idea being to hit the ground running. You've got a set of information. It's based on historical fact, so there can be very little on the opinion. It's something that we can kick off. The data is verified, and integrating the disciplines with performance specifications becomes really powerful. Another option was a single residence, a bespoke residence made and designed for Portland stone in a classical traditional period style architecture. And the benefit of when you kick the project off is all of the resources that are required to start that. The final one is looking at schools, and in particular a set of mixed schools that are required with grades, gender and locations, so boys and girls, all the different grades, and urban, peri-urban and rural. Basically the project was about packaging schools and buildings for contextualizing and placing on a site, and the package could then be appointed to a consultant team. All the digital records, so once again we come back to the ability to have historical records to help with actually assembling. So when we start the project, we go through a number of phases. The first part is we actually need some information, what's called the IPO, input, output, and processing. So IPO, we process. First part, input. That arrow indicates up to construction phase. So all the things that build up are along that arrow. Their contributions at the preparation and briefing stage, and a measure. What have we achieved? What haven't we got? From the modeling side, there's a feedback that comes in from each of the developments as we proceed. All of these require reviews. This is the part of the performance, is that it's no good just having a set of data, a benchmark, an input, without a review process and formalizing that review process. Construction and handover, final input from models, and close out and review. Simple little exercise, but basically to show us how we develop this. You may be able to see that the blocks on the bottom increase in size. This is the information that increases as we go. But it's also that there's a series of blocks below, and those are the deliverables that are coming out. They're part of the production that are actually coming down through the process. The final part is the most important part, is what we can compare at the input with the output. And for people who know that, it would be a gap analysis. Have a look at what happened and where were there things that would be of interest and information. Using AI, one of the great things, we could generate an analogy to the blocks of data and the buildings. Is how do things come up in a city? Along a timeline, how things grow and how they contribute to each other. So visual communication is vital. The next part about performance steps. What are the performance steps? So the first one is we have a series of 4 different steps. The first one, the 4 little blocks, just so everybody can see there's 4 different blocks. There's little blocks which depict data. And then there's deliverables, which are a packaged little box with sheets and reports. We see the next part, which is we firstly take the past projects, what were the deliverables, and any of the market information. And all of these are things which we do typically. It's just to make sure that we formalize them enough to understand them, that these are going to be part of the decision-making process. It's very important at that point to have the business case, and this has become more and more evident in the recent past. The envelope that we see in the next stage is about planning. So getting approvals for things is really important. So what are we looking at? Regulations, the site, the context, the record documents that are required, and the deliverables. So this example shows an envelope which is constrained by the side spaces, by the setbacks, any of the other planning requirements in the urban context, and also the maximum height of the building. So just a small graphic to show us that. The next one is design and construction. So that's a small snippet of the actual design and construction process. We see the building increasing, we see it starts with a form, we see that data increases, and we see that the deliverables increase. So what is it? We have the inputs on the left-hand side. We go through the progress and management, all important in how we actually control the costs and the efforts that we're putting in. Looking at the model and the site coordination, and probably the most important part, the automation. The final product is the output and then open for review. Here we start with the mass forms. Those were the things that were defined in the envelope. So open street maps, survey, cadastral information, context, location, the digital transformation. Important being that we understand what is the input and what's the output. What are we sharing and have we defined it? Little bit of license, I said former, test, fit, and giraffe. If you know the applications, these are the kinds of things that markedly help in assembling information here. So a case for automation is what can we do with these forms? And there we go. We do certain artistic, architectural, creative thoughts. What are the benefits? Well, we can consider costs as design happens. In this particular instance, we're looking at the multiple layers or floors, the levels, what's happening on the facade, what are the elements that are connected, and the junctions, because those are the most important part about what we have to detail at some point in the design. So detailing a delivery, costs and takeoffs could be live as we finish the design, as we do the steps before it gets published. The next step, case for automation, is actually analyzing that in a formal manner. And what it would be is that for early stage design, we could be looking at all the technologies, scans, photogrammetry, site information, joining all of these things up into the different forms, and then dealing with things like complexity and the impact on tasks, duration, coordination, increased collaboration, all related to performance. Reports on the progress, connectors, using APIs. That's the results. And again, once we've finished, we've got something that actually records what we have achieved. The next part of performance right now that has been really, really important was change management. So I took the residential project because it's actually quite an interesting task. This here was a period style building, got classical architecture elements. It's in a stone called Portland stone, and it's really nice as an architect. So one of the things that is of importance with change management is we need to have some structure in what we have. So it's a building, and the building will generate schedules. We now need to have changes, links, and status being linked to these schedules and to the model. And so we need a set of source documents and the model and connect it to a change register. So if we look at this, what was the trigger why change management in this particular project was so important? Was because frequent changes became an issue. The issue about changes is we need to identify what's billable, what's non-billable, and what is untouched. So, again, a case for automation. There we have the schedule, and what we've included is a certain number of parameters. Is something changed, yes or no? What is the nature of the change? Is it a client-led change? Or is it a design-led change? Or is it a code-led change? At any one time, the client-led changes are billable. The design and code-led changes are things that happen within the office, things that effectively do not acquire a billable amount. From the model, the schedule is updated. And that's the process we want. How does this work? The example was so many changes are taking place. This was the model split. Everything that's in red gives us some idea. The actions. So firstly, team members contribute to the issues. They could be on ACC, raising the issues. Pardon me. For review and for leads decisions. So there's engagement. The next part that this action provides is it extends the capability by team of ownership. I'll get to how the ownership is actually implemented. The view that you see, the monitoring is done. So in the model, it's done by the teams and the users. On the register, it's done by the leads and the teams, and off the dashboard, it's done by all people, right from the client all the way through. Reporting is done on demand and on tap. So when you press the button, it's available. So there's the legend. The red is client-led, the blue is design-led, and the green code-led. And anything that you see in gray, there were no changes. So this is a methodology now of how we might address a project. Set of parameters added, the ability to report on it, and to connect all the parties around the same thing. The one important part is keeping members of the team who are responsible within a certain portion of the building. They become the owner. So if there's a change, they get notified, make the change, they proceed, and they record that with these parameters in the model. So what are the benefits? The benefits of team members who now contribute, identifying issues. They are not just doing an administrative task. They're actually actively involved. So, the case for automation. We move on to it. Let's make it. Here's the change register. We've got a project ID, the stage, the location, and what type of change. We've got various sources. So these are the sources. Meeting minutes, formal instructions, change for a request for change, internal decisions when we have design meetings, any ad hoc instructions. So there could be somebody says, please make that change and gives the instruction down to the team. And then user identified issues. So you can raise the issue. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily a change, but it's identified. And this is an early thing that's happening in the model. So there we go. We're now going to treat that as the input. And with the input, we put that in the change register. The processing for that might be through Power Automate. Reading AI, reading the meeting minutes with the summary and feeding the information into the change register. Remember input, processing, the automation now. So AI capture, getting the summary, the tasks, who's going to actually be doing that? Using things like Power Automate, and in the process, publishing to a database and reporting. One key area of the processing is how to monitor and close out, an important factor in changes. The next part is the output and the action tracker. In this particular case, this action tracker was going to be shared by a large team in global locations. So the idea is that you can then extend this with the action tracker being updated, on demand, on tap reporting, and using for the business case Power BI to feed the information using SVG, images, the model, ACC, all the tools that we now have. So there are the key pieces, plugging it all in. Very useful capability. One of the next parts of this exercise is about effort and resources, and that's one of the measures that we really do need to pay attention to. So measuring performance means understanding what is required, what's used, what remains, on demand and automated as far as possible. So what do we do to keep control of effort and what is typically demanded? Timesheets. So timesheets are required by project, a task or deliverable, and what is used for better understanding, and the term I use here is finger on the pulse. That's important because it needs to be live. One of the problems that we have with the current practice is we have a series of tasks. We edit and do whatever we have to, and that checklist to say done or not. And we normally fill our timesheets manually through Excel or another application on a Friday. So we've missed from Monday to Thursday. Friday we try to remember what we did on Monday. It's no good. However, the worst part is when we get to Monday. And this is a case for automation. What happens? On Monday, we can't remember what we did the last week. So a big no, no, no. However, that's the goal, is to get a checked off list of the record of effort and hence the resources that we've used. I use the yellow for the golden thread. This is part of our track of what we need to keep track of. At some point, it's either going to be billable or not billable, but it gives us information about how long a task takes, important for performance matters. By comparison, something like the laptop or a digital device as the capture tool, we've got the same checklists of tasks which have been assigned and available. We have a big screen for the big people, the boss. And we have a reporting dashboard. Where's the planned? What's achieved? What's outstanding? And then finally, an accurate, vetted, verified task. What does the checklist actually do? Well, if this, and the example of an application that I was using just for reference was Toggle Track, and it's on a phone. It's the same as the old clock card machine. You basically open a task, close the task, and the moment you push the button, the benefit of the red block is the information appears on the dashboard. Whoever needs to see it. Okay, you control that. The person controls it by when they need to find the information on demand and on tap. And issues that are raised immediately are available for review or indication. So the case for automation is, imagine that this is being done on site, away from the site. There's nothing that gets wet except the device. The feedback is immediate. The review can be at the time that that individual requires it. And the improvement is in the efficiency, particularly in the tasks. What a briefing, what the task definition, what are the resources required? Better decision making being made all the time. There are some overheads. Obviously, one of those is devices. Two is the software. But one of the incredible benefits, if you take the business case, is that you have the information available on demand. So like the change management, what you're doing is you're actually bringing the change management, the tasks, the management, to management's access, and being able to make better decisions ongoing. The next part that we'll get close to winding up now is about who gets what slice of the pie. One of the problems that we've encountered is fees. And that's why the efforts and resources are so important, is that we need to know what is an accurate, verified duration required for a particular task. So, discussions that we've had in the past is who gets what slice of the pie. Now, this is just a generic identification. All of these different parties, and there's more, there's layered parties, because there must be multiple discipline of the people of the same discipline, of the teams. But one of the aspects that impacts this is the discussion required around accountability, responsibility, and ownership in all stages of the project. So the concept behind this is to incentivize a team in the benefits of performance. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to share some ideas, but how about we consider some of these and the application in projects where we now share some of that information. We have problems with NDAs, copyright, confidentiality, but some of these things would markedly help us with the data set that we have if we can share better information about what the kinds of ratios were. And in terms of digital deployments, maximizing our experience and in fact being able to better serve the entire construction industry. As you can see, I said the BIM manager is the most important person, but there would be many, many parties. Think important, please remember, people plus process plus technology. Thank you very much.